book? Like the one that just happened. Like, did you chance upon that and then think this is a great lesson that I can use, or did you like vet through a couple and then think this would be the best one, or something like that?
Can you repeat the question? Yeah, I will. So the question is, how do I choose the stories that end up in the book? He said, is it something that I just come across randomly, or do I like research a few and put them together and then decide? It's a little bit of both. A lot of times when I want to talk about a concept, I'll kind of have a couple stories in mind, but I read a lot, and so I'm always like kind of keeping an eye out for a good example. And so actually when I was writing, I had been writing this book for like 2 months, and he died. He lived to be like, I think he lived to be like 95 or something. He just died like 3 years ago.
Japanese culture, man. They live forever.
Dude, indestructible, this guy. So he just died when I started reading it, and I'd never heard of him. And so I read this newspaper article, and I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And so then I went and read a bunch of stuff about him, but what usually happens is for every story that makes it into the book, there's probably one or two that get cut, that I write and then they get cut out. That's just true of writing in general. So, but yeah, I try to keep an eye out.
In order to get the stories you get, do you like highlight, take notes in a separate book so you can like reuse them later? Like what? How do you?
So the question is, do I take notes or have like some organizational system? Yeah. I don't.
No?
I really don't. I've tried. I'm a really unorganized person. And so here's my big research method, I guess, is like I read something and then I remember it exists. And then like 5 years later, I'm like writing an article or a chapter and I'm like, hey, that story would be great. And then I spend like the next 2 hours like pulling the book out and like looking for it and like making sure I'm like not. But I don't enjoy. I mean, I can either spend that couple hours going back and like refreshing my memory and making sure I get like all the details correct, or I can spend extra time while I'm reading, taking notes, and I just prefer to go back if I need it. Because 90% of the stuff you read, you don't need, you never go back to. So
that's true.
Yeah.
What books are you reading right now?
I'm reading 2 books at the moment. One is called The New Tsar. It's a biography of Vladimir Putin. Speaking of Russia, it is excellent. It's insanely well researched. It's a bit intense at times, but it's very good. And then the other one I'm reading is called Hillbilly Elegy, and it's a memoir. Didn't you said you guys did that, right?
Yeah.
Harper One or Harper?
Harper.
Okay, Harper. Yeah, it's really good, and it's kind of blown up because of the whole Trump phenomenon. So it's a memoir about a guy who grew up in like rural Kentucky, and it's a rags to riches story, and it's his memoir kind of commenting on the culture he grew up in and like why it's falling apart, and like why people in the middle of the country are thinking the way they're thinking and behaving the way they're behaving. And so it's become extremely popular recently. I think there's somebody, yeah.
Hi, Mark. I'm a huge fan.
Thanks.
I read your book, and I also read Models. So, quick question following up on the first one. What were some stories that were about to get into the book where you're like, no? So like,
oh, man. What did we cut? I don't remember.
not a lot.
It felt like a lot. It was like gut-wrenching. What stories got cut from the book? You know what's funny, actually? So there are a few blog posts from last year that are outtakes of the book. So I wrote a post. So there's a post about Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud's nephew, and how like mass media like affects our self-perceptions and our insecurities. Yeah. So that was actually originally part of the book. I think there's a couple others. I can't remember right now. If I think of one, I'll mention it. Yeah. I think you mentioned in an article that you started over from scratch. What was it like before you started over, and what made you like try to rewrite it? So the question is, I mentioned on the website that I basically kind of had to start the book over from scratch. So the original version and why I did that. So the original version of the book was much longer, much more intellectual, and like looking back, I think I was a little bit insecure, and I was like just trying to prove how smart I was. And basically what happened is I finished about 50% of the first draft, and I gave it to a few close friends, people who like I really respect their opinion, and they basically all came back and were like, "This is terrible. This is really bad." I mean, they didn't say it like that, but like that's basically
That's what they said.
that was basically the reaction. But they said they're like, the ideas are great, but like, dude, this is what is this writing? Like, what are you trying to sound like here? So it wasn't so much, I didn't start over from scratch as much as like I just like ripped that apart completely, took like the core ideas and then rewrote in kind of the same tone that I write the blog in. So
how did you feel like when they told you about
oh, horrible. Dude, it's like, imagine working 6 months on something and then like people just shit on it. Like, it feels really bad. Do you have a question?
I watched a video of you where you said that you almost died by poison in Ecuador.
In Ecuador?
Yeah.
Did I don't think it was... Okay, I didn't almost die. But I did get very sick in Ecuador once, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm from there, and I was thinking, like, what did he, like, try or ate that made him, like, kind of feel like poison or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just Latin America in general. So, I can tell you, I went to Montanitas. So, went out to, like, some, like, small beach towns, and so you get into some restaurants there where, like, they don't clean everything, and it's not an Ecuador thing. It's just,
All right.
yeah. Yep.
I really like your tone in writing in your emails and your blog. So I don't remember if it was in your book or in something else that I heard you speak in giving advice to writers and trying to find a voice. But then, what was your process for you to find out like the voice that worked, or because I think the great thing about your book, from what you were saying about giving it to your friends and sounding more intellectual, is that there's great message in it, but then it's also a book that's like easy to read, or it's like easy to understand these like really hard thoughts.
Yeah.
So how did you get to like finding like the right voice that like really just makes you distinct? So
the question is writing advice, like how do you find your voice, like learn your own style. The advice I always give is write the way you would want to read something. So, you know, when I read stuff, oftentimes I'll have the thought, I'm like, well, this is a really interesting article, but like, this guy's very dry, or he gives way too many like unnecessary details. And so I try to have that same approach to my own writing. You know, it's like, I want to write like the most badass article that I would love to read myself. And because I think what most people do, especially when they start out, is they start out like, how do I write what other people want to hear? You know, like how do I read what my friends will think is cool? And it has to start with yourself. Write what you think is cool and what's exciting to you. Yep.
Have you thought of going to Africa?
I have.
I haven't read your book. I just found out about it.
Yeah, sure.
I thought I should come here and learn about it.
She asked me about Africa. So I haven't been many places. I've just been to Tanzania and South Africa.
You were close to my country, Rwanda.
Which one?
Rwanda.
Rwanda. I've heard great things.
You should go. There's so many stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'd love to. Africa's so big. Like, there's so many places. But yeah, I'd like to go back.
I'm a writer, so we should work together and find stories.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are you allowed to tell us about your next book?
I think I'm allowed to tell you more than I actually am willing to. All I'm saying right now is that it's going to be about relationships, and it's going to be, the goal is for me to write the whole thing this year and then publish it next year. But it's still very early in the process, so yeah. We'll see what happens. Yeah, exactly. Somebody, you haven't gone yet.
How do you come up with ideas on what to write? Because like, the first thing I ever read from you was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and I'm like, this is something that's so intrinsic and so applicable in everyday life, and it's something that people don't think about.
Yeah.
So how did you come up with the idea? That's what like drew me to you.
So the question is, how do I come up with what I write about?
Yeah.
It comes from basically two places. One is I read a lot, and I read a lot of kind of like nerdy stuff. So I read a lot of philosophy or psychology books and stuff. And oftentimes when I read it, I want to talk to my friends about it or talk to people in my life about it. And so you just by talking about it, you translate these very like complex ideas into like these kind of simple statements, It's like, so you start talking about values, and it's like, well, yeah, you don't give a fuck about these things, and so I try to pay attention when I have those conversations with people in my life of like, how are we translating these like very deep ideas into simple language, and then I try to write that way, basically. Yeah.
Throughout all your books, is there like an underlying thesis that you're trying to put forward, or some sort of mission you're trying to get to?
The question is there any underlying thesis or mission to all my work? I guess it's like, I guess the answer is no. I mean, the big motivating thing for me is I write what feels important to myself, and so if you go back and read what I wrote 2010, 2011, it has to do with a lot of the things I was struggling with at that time. This book covers a lot of the stuff that I was struggling with 2-3 years ago. So one way I kind of describe my work is that it's a very public form of therapy. Like, I'm basically going out and trying to like work on my insecurities and flaws, and then I take it in a way that other people can benefit from it, so like I try to never fall into the trap of feeling like I have the answers. For me it's more like, this is a bunch of shit I spent 2-3 years going through, and this is what I learned from it, and this is how I feel very strongly about it, and here you go, knock yourself out. And so everything that's, the relationship book, it's like I just got married, I'm getting older, so I'm thinking a lot more about family, my parents are getting older, maybe I have kids, so all these things are going on in my head right now, things that I never had to think about much before. And so that's kind of like inspiring some of the new content. Yeah.
Your blog is really cool, sophisticated, and it's very well organized. They mentioned in an article that Forbes had written calling you a self-help entrepreneur. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But how does the blog, and as you begin to develop that website, begin to inform your writing? How does your writing now go back and inform your blog? I mean, you've done well in two different areas, really.
So the question is, how does the blog influence the books, and kind of like, what's my perspective on my career, I guess, like how do I organize my career? The blog is fantastic because I see it as kind of one of its uses for me is that it's kind of a testing ground for material. I guess, like the same way a comedian will go to like a small club to test out new jokes. It's like, if I've got some ideas that I'm really excited about, but I don't know if they're like that good, I can put them on the blog and see. And you'll see what blows up, and you'll see what gets ignored. So the blog is a great tool in that regard, and it's something that I want to keep maintaining throughout my writing career, basically for that reason. How the books influence the blog is nice because the people, most people who are picking up the book now, they've never heard of me before. So if they pick up the book and they love it, the blog is like it's a good place where like they can continue to engage with my ideas or engage with me. And so I see it as they're both providing value for one another. Like there's a real synergy built between them. Yes, you in the back.
When you first started writing, how did you decide whose feedback to take in or to ask for? And then most importantly, how did you decide of that feedback what to actually incorporate and like protect your writing?
So the question is, what feedback do you listen to? Start with people you respect the most. So I have...
Your writing style you respect the most, or just them?
Just their brains, basically. Because like I have friends who they don't have the same style as me, but they're very, very smart people, and so I can run ideas by them, and they'll tell me if they like it or not. So yeah, start with a few people close to you who have taste or intelligence that you respect, and take them the most seriously. Also, not just because they have good taste and intelligence, but because they know you the best. So like because those are the people that are going to spot when you're faking it and when you're trying to impress, and they're going to be the ones who are going to call you out on it. Like random people, they're not going to notice. They're just going to be like, oh, this is boring. And then in terms of like random feedback and criticism online, I look for good grammar, punctuation, preferably not all in caps lock. Any references to religion or Jesus, I ignore. You can spot intelligent criticism. Yeah, Luke.
Thank you for ignoring my attempts to ask you a question until now. So something I've never asked you is, when you write something on the blog or when you write a chapter of a book, does it then change? Do you work through some of your own stuff when you do that? Like, do you come out of the other end of a piece of writing behaving differently, better, worse? Do you see a difference in yourself as people around you say, what happened, Mark? And you say, well, I've just been thinking for 6 weeks about this piece, and here I am.
Usually not.
Should I ask you why?
Yeah, you're right. There you go. Sometimes, on a few occasions, that has happened. But generally, it's more like the posts I write are part of the effect and not the cause. So if I write a post about something, it's usually because that is something I was dealing with 6 months ago or a year ago or whatever, and I kind of feel like I finally got to a spot where I'm like comfortable with it. And the funny thing about personal change too is like there's this weird period. So like we tend to have like the most negative reaction to people who remind us of like how we just were. So like let's take I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Like let's say you quit smoking and you successfully quit smoking. I think the people who are like the most virulently like judgmental towards smokers are people who just quit smoking like in the last year, and like because it reminds you of who you just were and who you just had to like overcome, like all like the thing about you had to overcome. And so what I notice a lot of times, and I think this contributes to my brash tone, is that oftentimes what I'm writing about is some bullshit I just got over in myself like a year or two ago, and I'm like, I'm angry about it. You know, it's like I see it in other people now, and I'm like, fuck it, you're doing it wrong, and like I'm gonna explain why you're wrong. Listen to me, you know. And then it's funny because then like 5 years later, like I don't care anymore. I'm like, oh, you know, like a lot of the dating stuff is like that now. I get emails about the exact same issues, exact same like, you know, guy didn't call me back, girl didn't call me back. I'm like, sucks, man. Like, what do you want me to do? You want me to call him? I'm not gonna call him. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about becoming I'm Martin, by the way, pleasure to meet you. Have you ever thought about becoming a coach one-on-one sessions, or even becoming a motivational speaker in front of a larger audience?
Yeah, so
you've done speaking engagements before.
Yeah. So I used to do some one-on-one consulting years ago, and I stopped. Mainly just because I was much more passionate about the writing, and I felt like writing's more scalable, you know? An hour spent on writing can get to 1 million people, you know? It's in an hour one-on-one, you get to one person. The speaking thing I thought about for a while too, because in this industry, in the self-help industry, there's kind of like a progression. So you get like a big website or a book, and then the next big step is you do like a big seminar, and then you fill that up and make tons of money, and then you like go out and hire a bunch of people and start doing, you know, the Tony Robbins thing basically. And I decided not to do that for a few reasons. One is it just doesn't sound like fun to me. That's probably the most important reason. The second is what I was telling him, where I really, really want to discourage this guru model of like, there's the guy who has the answers. Let me listen to him and like let him dictate my identity. I really want to avoid that, and I want to try to promote more of a sense of like, I'm screwed up, you're all screwed up, we're all screwed up together, let's talk about it. And so yeah, I think doing a big seminar thing like that doesn't lend that self to it. So I may still do something in the future, like maybe do some video, or I don't know, like a YouTube channel or something. I don't know, but I have thought a lot about that, and it's just, I decided it's not a path I want to go down. Besides, I like writing too much. Like, I'd rather, like, Tony, like, if you ever see Tony on stage, you're like, that guy was fucking born to do that, you know? Mm-hmm. And his books are like, they're basically marketing, and I feel like I'm the opposite. Like, I was born to do this. Standing in front of people is just something I do because it's fun sometimes, and it helps the business. Yep.
Which of your posts do you hear back about the most?
Fuck yes or no.
Which post? Yeah, fuck yes or no.
That's my favorite one.
Fuck yes or no is so, like, it's infiltrated people so much that it's, if you go on OkCupid or Plenty of Fish, there are, which I don't recommend, or like Match.com, there are hundreds or maybe even thousands of people who are now linking fuck yes or no in their profiles on dating websites. And so they're like, it's just before you message me, read this article.
You get referral traffic from OkCupid?
I get tons of referral traffic from OkCupid. That's how I found out about this. It's like 1 month I had like 10,000 visitors from OkCupid, and like we went and looked at it and we're like, oh my god, people are posting this in their profiles. It's crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's the best article.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned you don't really use
Fuck
like,
yes,
dating websites or apps, I'm assuming?
No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, it's not that I was making a joke. I mean, my whole stance on the dating website and app thing is like, do what works. You know, some people really like it and they get a lot out of it. Some people don't like it, they don't get much out of it. I mean, I think it's pretty clear at this point, like, what the drawbacks are, what the benefits are. So, you know, choose. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but can I share with you an epiphany I had from your book that relates to relationships? So I'm
Sure.
really looking forward.
I talked a lot about this. So she told a story about her ex who basically learning to be vulnerable, learning to be open. And I wrote a lot about this in my dating book for men. But yeah, stay tuned. Yep.
Yeah, so going back to actually models, I recently read, because you just said you're going to write a relationship book, and I'm really into the relationship scene. And like couples and stuff, like
I hang out at all the relationships.
No, I do. But I've read a ton of books.
Coffee, ice cream, do it all, man.
Do it all. Well, no, I've been in a relationship for 3 years. Partially, what helped me was your book Models, because pickup industry, did all that, whatever.
Yeah.
Then I read Neil Strauss's The Truth. I don't know if you've read that yet, and it blew my mind. I was just like, wow, like you went from that to this.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you said you finally got married, I was like, oh, it's like happening. Like in the industry, it's just like it's happening.
It's called maturity.
Yeah, exactly. So I
guess what
is right, and I just wanted to know, like, in your new book, like, are you gonna explain like how you feel about the industry now versus how you? I mean, you still had a strong stance against it in Models, the way you talked about it.
At this point, I have nothing to say about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of garbage out there.
Yes.
And I think I've made that pretty clear. And so yeah, no, probably not.
No. Okay.
Yep.
I know you have Ryan Holiday like on the back of your book. I think he was in your editing or helped with it. And he writes a lot about stoicism. I think there's like this big resurgence of stoicism like, everywhere. And I think there's a lot of parallels in how you like in your book and in the message of the subtle art of not giving a fuck. So were like Stoic philosophies or principles like inspired, like help you write your message or define it?
It's funny. So he interviewed me for dailystoic.com, and he asked me about this. So there's a long explanation there. The short version is, no, not directly. My influence actually comes, or my history rather, my kind of philosophical history. I spent a number of years really into Zen Buddhism, and Zen is kind of like the Stoicism of Eastern philosophy. It's like Zen is the form of Buddhism where they're like, sit down, shut up. By the way, you don't exist. Like, get over yourself. You don't know anything. And that always really appealed to me. So I'd read a little bit of Stoicism, but I never got like super into it. But it's funny because there is a lot of overlap there. And I think that's why, like when I discovered Ryan's work and I read Obstacles the Way, I'm like, dude, this guy's like, we're like brothers from a different mother. Different philosophical mother. So yeah. Yep.
3 of your most like controversial articles were the articles where you criticize Brazil, India, and the U.S. But you only wrote like a reply article about India because you got so many emails about India. Why only the Indian one and not like the one for Brazil and the U.S.? Because you probably got a lot of hate mail for that.
I got way more email. The reason why is the India one was written first, and my audience was much, much smaller. And so when you only get like 200 hate mails, you feel like you can reply to them. But yeah, by the time the other 2 happened, it like the quantity was so massive that it's like, what's the point, you know? Besides, the other thing I learned from the India one is when you write a reply to all your haters, it doesn't make anything better. Learned that one the hard way. Professionally versus self-publishing. Basically, so the very, very short answer to this, like it's a difficult question, and I think it's going to be a different answer for every writer. Self-publishing has a lot of advantages, and then conventional publishing also has a lot of advantages. Ultimately, the question that kind of tipped me off the fence was somebody asked me, he said, do you believe there are a lot of people who will read your book who don't get on Facebook, don't read blogs? And I said, yes, I think so. And he said, then you should get a convention. You should get a publisher. Because if the answer is no, then yeah, just do your own thing. You know. Cool. So